Okay, so welcome to week 10. This week we're going to be talking about PowerShell, and then we're going to be diving into network diagramming a little bit. So for this presentation, we're going to just be going over PowerShell because network diagramming is not included in the book that we were using as a guideline for this course. So I'm just going to be doing a session on or a recording on that separately, where we'll go through and create a simple network diagram for the lab network that we created during the term. So first we're going to go into PowerShell here. So PowerShell is the advanced scripting language that is used in Windows. It can be used to control pretty much everything in Windows. And then there's modules, which we'll go over, or providers that you can use to interact with other areas of the Windows operating system, like Active Directory, Azure, Azure Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint. There's all kinds of different providers that you can use. So our learning objectives are to explain the purpose and configuration of Windows PowerShell, identify the components, features, and usage of Windows PowerShell, use PowerShell to manage a server, and then create PowerShell scripts for system administration activities. So PowerShell supports the MS-DOS shell output redirection and command chaining. Most commands in PowerShell run or consist of what they call commandlets. So those are the actual commands that you're running. They don't call them commands, they call them commandlets. And then piping is how you send information between the commandlets to build more complex commands or filters. The output of the display. So it's a common way to essentially provide data to the next command or provide settings to the next command. Many commandlet options exist. So there's a what if, confirm, verbose, debug, error action. So natively, the commands support those options for various things. And then PowerShell supports special navigation keys and key combinations for your keyboard. And then PowerShell's features provide additional functionality or increased efficiency from regular old MS-DOS commands. So you can customize the PowerShell sessions. So you can change the look and how it's executed. You can provide specific options to the PowerShell command. And then you can create a PowerShell console file that has a PSC1 extension. This is what stores those customizations, like the coloring and all of those type of things, if you like to do that for your command line actions. And then you can use aliases and functions. So an alias is a command shortcut that makes navigating and using Windows PowerShell easier. And then functions can execute multiple commandlets. So you can create functions inside of your scripts that perform a specific function, and then kind of just a programming technique if anybody's familiar with functions and programming. Same idea there. And then you have PowerShell profile scripts. So alias and function commands placed in a PowerShell profile script. And then it's automatically executed every time Windows PowerShell is started for the user. I don't really know what you would ever use this for, but it's there. And then you must first enable script execution before making the script, and then edit the PowerShell profile using the command Notepad profile with PowerShell. And then modifying the command output, you can pipe the output, you can use recurse, sort object, group object, convert to HTML, and then the all common export to CSV command or output. And then PowerShell consists of objects. So pretty much everything inside of PowerShell is an object. So the object has attributes. So those are the properties that describe the object. It has methods. So the methods are things that the object can do. And then they control nearly all aspects of the Windows operating system, processes, files, network sockets. Pretty much anything that is in .NET you can do in PowerShell. So PowerShell provider plugins. So this is where the real power of PowerShell comes in. So this provides functionality to PowerShell to other systems. So this allows PowerShell to interact with other parts of the system. So there's many different ones. There's file system provider. That's the default. There's Active Directory. There's Exchange. There's a million different providers. And then there's third-party providers that people make for software. So there's SQL providers. There's MySQL providers. There's PostgreSQL providers. There's all kinds of different stuff that you can use. And then there's, variable provider, environment provider, alias provider, function provider, certificate provider, registry provider. There's a bunch of different types. And then obviously with that, many commands are supported by using the providers. So here's some of the commands that can be used with any PowerShell provider. So get location, set location, copy item, remove item, move item. So these are just common, commands. And here you have their alias and then the DOS and Linux equivalents. And here's some more of those. So what do we use PowerShell for? So PowerShell can be used for many tasks. So post-installation tasks when you install Windows. So if there's certain things that need to be done, you can run a PowerShell script to do that. View, install, and remove Windows roles and features. And here we're just talking about things within the Windows operating system, not any of the roles and features that are installed. So those are usually exposed via provider, but this is just with the Windows operating system. And then you can also configure and troubleshoot the network and configure firewall settings, manage services and processes, and then perform remote administration of computers within the domain environment. So the commandlets allow an administrator to specify the computer name for a task. So this is powerful because you can have it run on a remote computer. And then you can execute a PowerShell script on several computers within a domain or hundreds, thousands. They just have to be online. So that's another excellent feature of PowerShell. So one of the main areas of PowerShell is that it uses WMI. So WMI consumers programs and system software that can query WMI. And any of you are not familiar with WMI, it's an easy way to get all the details about a Windows operating system. So that's how PowerShell does do that. And then you have WMI infrastructure. This collective components built into the operating system that respond to the WMI queries. You have namespaces, providers, and classes. And again, I'm not going to get into this too much, but the real power is within the WMI classes. Administrators can query and manipulate certain areas of those results. So just a quick way to get information. So how do you create a PowerShell script? So you can use Notepad to do this, and then basically you just save it with the extension of PS1. Commands execute from top to bottom, so it runs like any other script. Contents, you can use Windows commands. You can use PowerShell commandlets. You can use the complex control structures, which we're going to go over later. And then you can reuse PowerShell code in different situations. So you can copy it from one to the other in a reusable fashion. Another area that you can use is the PowerShell integrated services environment, which we'll go over later in the chapter here. So how do you execute the PowerShell script? So you enable script support in Windows PowerShell and verify execution policy, which we'll go over in our session for Lab 10.1. And then you execute a PowerShell script in PowerShell. So basically you open up PowerShell from the start menu, and then you go to your path using regular old DOS commands, and then, or you can do the full path, and then, or you can use the relative path depending on where you're at. So how do you execute a PowerShell script outside of PowerShell? You run the PowerShell command in the Windows Run dialog box, and then you supply the script path as an argument. So there's a special way that you do that, but we're not going to go over that in this. So what I said earlier was about the Windows PowerShell ISE. So this is a integrated, or it's like a notepad on steroids for PowerShell. So it gives you all the commands that you have imported, which we're going to use in our Lab 10.1 to create our PowerShell script example. So you'll get a first-hand experience, but it's a very nice way to run scripts. You can test them, you can see the output, all that kind of stuff. And you can create and test scripts on remote computers from here. You do need WinRM started within the Windows PowerShell ISE though. This is kind of what the ISE looks like. You can see here you write your script, and then you have your output in the bottom window, and then on the right it gives you, based on what modules you have installed, it gives you all the possible commands that you can run, or you can filter it down by module and search. It's a really nice way to do this. You can clear the output. There's all kinds of things that you could do inside of the Windows PowerShell ISE. It's definitely the preferred way to write scripts in Windows now, instead of just using like Notepad or Notepad++ or something like that. So in your PowerShell scripts, variables and constants store a value in memory for later use. Just like any other scripting language, variables work the same way. You can either do that by starting the word with a $, which is the variable identifier. So instead of like in Java or JavaScript, it's var space the name. This is just you put a $, and then the name of the variable equals whatever you want it to equal. So you want to avoid special characters and reserved words, which if you do, it'll give you an error. Then you can optionally use the set variable command instead of using the $. It's just another way to do that. And then optionally, if it's a certain type of object that you're trying to cast into it, you can prefix the variable with a typecast that can be used to verify that the object's type is correct when it's set. And then your constant values cannot be changed. So once you set them equal once, they can't be changed again. So how do you escape meta characters? So you can do double quotes, single quotes, or back quotes. And then your coloring and formatting output eases readability. So many commandlets allow for the modification of output color. So this is cool because you can give it green if it's a success, give it yellow if it's failure. So you can easily see that when it's running through hundreds of lines and stuff like that. And then separator characters are used when printing several variables. So it will print those out in a readable format. Decision constructs allow modification of the flow of a PowerShell script. And then everyone must have a condition that returns true or false. So this would be your if, switch constructs. They all need to return a true or false value. So here's those inline operators that you can use. So there's equal is EQ, not equal is NE. So these are all your inline comparison operators that you can use. And then here's some logical operators that you can use. So you have your and, or, not. So that's just another way that you can do that. So another thing that you can do, like in many other scripting languages, you do loops. So you have your loop constructs that allow the performance of a task several times. So you have a for each, you have a for, while, do while, do until. So you can use any of those. Most commonly, you probably use for each, just because it's a much easier way to do a for loop. And then most important thing with the for loops and for each loops is start small and then use comments so that you know where it's at. Ensure that the script allows the commandlets to operate on different objects. And then, most importantly, it's always easy to find an example on the internet and then adapt that to your situation. There's so many people that use PowerShell now. It's out in the wild. It's been for a long time. So it's really easy to find examples, which is kind of what we're going to do for our Lab 10-1. So we're going to find an example online, and then we're going to implement that in our lab. So in summary, PowerShell can be used to manage and configure Windows Server 2019. It can be used to perform many different administrative tasks. And then PowerShell console files and Power Profile scripts ease administration for your system administrators. So this is it for our PowerShell portion. We're going to go into a lot more detail in our lab. And I'm going to give you guys some tips and pointers on things in PowerShell that I've learned over the years, as I've been using PowerShell for a long time now. Use it for pretty much any administrative task that's not that's repetitive. So see everyone in Lab 10-1.